Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
People don't necessarily have cooking skills and management skills or people skills. And for some people, it's learned, and some people, it's innate. There might be some that you have to speak to really, really sternly for them to get it and correct their ways. And there may be another cook that if you speak that way, they're just going to either break into tears or be unmotivated or things like that. You have to look at what you want to get from them and then figure out the best way to deliver it.
A part of the American culinary revolution starting in the 1980s, Chef Emily Lucchetti helped define what great pastry means in America. Emily attended the New York Restaurant School, and after extensive travel, she was on the opening team at Jeremiah Tower's Stars in San Francisco, where she embraced pastry and never looked back. Chef Emily then moved on to other iconic Bay Area restaurants like Farallon, Water Bar, and then for Big Night Restaurant Group. Emily is the author of 5 dessert cookbooks, including James Beard Foundation Award-nominated Stars Desserts and A Passion for Ice Cream, for which she won an IACP Cookbook Award. Her honors include the James Beard Foundation Award for Outstanding Pastry Chef, the James Beard Foundation Who's Who of Food and Beverage in America, the Women Chefs and Restaurateurs Golden Whisk Award, and Food Arts Magazine Silver Spoon Award. Emily has served as a dean at the International Culinary Center in New York and California, and was chairperson of Women Chefs and Restaurateurs. And she has spent 19 years on the James Beard Foundation Board of Trustees.
A team is a group of individuals, and each way they're contributing in ways that are very, very important, but you need to have that same team mentality. People coming into the restaurant and me being able to give them my desserts, and I was controlling all of it. None of the desserts I do are particularly difficult. They don't have a lot of bells and whistles. So I really wanted to give people the opportunity to make great desserts at home for their family and friends and control the environment that they were in. I grew up on the East Coast, and I met my husband in New York City. I was working in an executive dining room near Wall Street. He was a trader. I worked there for about a year and a half. I said, okay, I want to do this cooking thing. And so I went to the New York Restaurant School, and then I went to France for a year and cooked, because back then it was like France was Mecca, and that's where everybody went. And I was doing all savory food at the time. And then when I came back, he is from California, and he wanted to move back to San Francisco area. And I'm like, sure, I'll go to California. And it's funny when I think back on that, I wonder, as far as moving to California versus staying in New York, I wonder if I would have been a happy pastry chef, the same pastry chef, if I had stayed in New York instead of going to California.
Arguably not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you probably
100%.
learned so many different things in California,
and I think that
you wouldn't
the
anywhere
California thing just fortunately hit my values of food and my lifestyle and my personality of keep it simple, keep it straightforward. And what was interesting at the time when Stars opened, I started at Stars. Again, I was on savory back in the very beginning. I started by opening oysters, like one step above the dishwasher. And I remember no one really knew what it was going to be, what it could be, or anything like that. But we were just, here was Jeremiah, who was a very charismatic, very brilliant, creative person. And
whom I've had the honor of cooking with, I'm happy to say. Yes.
Yeah. And we're like, well, let's just see what happens. And I remember I had 2 job offers and I just said, well, I think the stars thing just sounds kind of interesting. And then I think just what people don't realize, it was the first open kitchen.
Had you followed his career before he had started?
Not really, because I had come to California and I didn't really know anyone. I just heard they were looking, looking for cooks. And I think the other thing then about cooking at that time, I mean, this was the mid-'80s. There was no internet. There was no, there was internet, but there wasn't any. People were just cooking in their little corners, if you will, whether it was San Francisco or New York or LA, and they weren't comparing themselves to anybody else because unless you went on a plane and you went to someone's restaurant, you just were totally absorbed in what you were doing. And it was really an exciting time because it just made everybody, in a way, so individual and so unique and so different. And, coming to California and just seeing all that incredible produce. I mean, growing up in Western New York State, I don't think I'd really had an avocado, a really good one, until I moved to California. Even the produce at Safeway was better than where I grew up.
Or the avocado pear, as they used to call them, I think, in the 70s.
Exactly. Right? And so you can't help but look at all the amazing produce and everything like that and just be inspired by it because it just tastes so much better. And also, I think at that time, it was so ironic, and Jeremiah hit it so right, is that everyone is paying attention to local food in Europe and all that kind of stuff, but the United States is importing food. We have so much local produce, especially in California, not just with the produce, but with the fish and everything like that. It's like, let's take advantage of what is in our own backyard.
Yeah. And that was really the first time. I mean, that movement was one of the real first times in this country where the European mentality around small local markets and purchasing from farmers and all that sort of stuff really became viable for restaurants.
Yeah. And obviously Chez Panisse and Alice Waters started doing it in the 70s. She really focused on it. But I think the thing with Jeremiah and Stars, because Jeremiah was the flamboyant, charismatic man that he really was able to put it on the map much more. And, coming into Stars Restaurant was just an experience. It was an experience for the food. It was an experience for the culture. And being near the symphony and the opera house, we would be full at 5:30 and then it would all empty. It was like a wave. People would come in at 5:30. They'd leave at 7:30 and then to make the opera, the symphony, and another wave would come back and then they'd come back for dessert. So it was, I feel really fortunate to have been there and been part of that culinary revolution, I guess, if you will, because most of the people then in the kitchen too, they had masters and PhDs, but everyone was just cobbling it, together. And I look at younger cooks today and I just kind of say, I wish they could have seen it in the beginning because it just gives you a totally different perspective.
Yeah. And were there takeaways that you had from Stars that were not just culinary, but kind of professionally related in terms of, because you just have had this career that is just, it's unbelievable. And you're involved in so many things and you go wide and deep. It's not like you do everything and you do it half-assed. You do everything so with such intent, and you're so involved. And I just think like that had to come from somewhere too, right?
Yeah, well, I think that, one, I've always believed in giving back. I was raised with parents that just you give back to your community. And also, I just like to keep things interesting for myself. My approach whenever I was at work and managing people was like, put yourself out of every job that you're doing during the course of a day. And some people will feel threatened by that if they don't have anything that's, only theirs. But get everybody to do everything that you possibly can and create something else for yourself to do. Yeah. And I remember when I decided to write my first book, it was like, gosh, I have all these recipes and I know every cook is leaving. When they leave, they copy all the recipes when I'm not there and take them home because that's what I would have done too. So it's like, well, I better write the book before someone else does.
And then flesh out their own catalogs. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so then you write a second book because you finally figure it out after the end of your first book. So it's always been a combination of just trying to learn more and do more and keep things interesting. And one of the other things too is like when you're in a kitchen working, especially if you're management, there are only so many people that really understand what you're going through every day, because the cooks all can bond together, and you can bond with them obviously to a certain extent, but they don't understand you. And you're also very isolated because you're rolling out your dough, you're making your béarnaise or whatever it is. And so one of the things that really prompted me to go on the Beard Board 20 years ago, where as you said, I just went off, is that I wanted to build that community for chefs to have each other. And I wanted that community for myself. And so I'm thinking, if I want it for myself, maybe other people could benefit from it too. And back then, a lot of the beard stuff was really only what I call the one percenters. The people that were involved were the people that just got awards, and not just your average chef. And so, when Eric Kessler came on and started the boot camp and stuff, I'm like, this is just right up my alley, because it's all about inclusion and community for me. I love bringing people together.
Yeah, and that kind of trickles into mentoring, right? Which you have is something that you've taken on and championed in your career for sure. I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on teams and specifically mentoring, because it's a really important topic today as we navigate this whole new workforce who, hasn't always had access to great mentorship. And, I'm curious in your mind, kind of what are some of the ways that you've had the most profound impact on the teams that you've led throughout your career?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting when you're working in a kitchen, if you can cook, they promote you. And they promote you to a manager, and they promote you. But people don't necessarily have cooking skills and management skills or people skills. And for some people, it's learned, and some people it's innate. I've always been fortunate that I've kind of been very empathetic. But when I managed my teams at Stars and Farallon and stuff, I always wanted to work for really big restaurants. And the reason I did that, as in a pastry department, you have a bigger team. So we had 7 people. If you're a small mom and pop operation, you have a pastry chef, a half a pastry chef, or something like that, because
or it's
just
you, right?
Yeah, or it's you, and it's just financial sense. And they're coming in at 7 a.m. and leaving at 10 a.m. when the shift comes in. So I wanted to work in some place, that was bigger, so I could be part of something bigger. And so my attitude about managing people is you have to look at everybody on your team as individuals and what motivates them. Because there might be some employee that I have to speak or cook, sounds better than employee, that you have to speak to really, really sternly for them to get it and correct their ways. And there may be another cook that if you speak that way, they're just going to either break into tears or be unmotivated or things like that. So it's like you have to look at what you want to get from them and then figure out the best way to deliver it. And you have to go way outside your own head. And the other thing too is so many people make the mistake of what you say isn't necessarily what people hear. And if people and managers and people in leadership really have to focus on that, because you could say 2 things to your blue in the face to 2 different people and they're not going to get it the same way. So, and that's I think
really true. And you must have seen a bunch of things that didn't work, right, as well. Like the experiences that you've had, I would imagine you take as much of the bad as you do the good and kind of filter down and say, okay, now I know how I'm not going to treat that situation.
Correct. Yeah. Right? I remember many times I would yell at people, and then I made myself, because in the heat of the moment, I made myself go back and apologize, because I think it's important to have that trust. And I think it's really important to make people realize that a team is a group of individuals, and each way they're contributing in ways that are very, very important, but you need to have that same team, mentality. And I also feel really, really strongly about give yourself the shitty tasks on the list and let people do the fun stuff.
And get in there with them, right? I think that was something that was always so important for me as a chef, was to always, genuinely, because I wanted to and I was interested, right?
Yeah.
And curious, but also just kind of having the foresight to know that the more you're in the trenches with them, the more respect that they have for you. And you can actually use those moments to problem solve together, which I always found to
100%.
be a much better approach than kind of me sitting somewhere in an office scribbling on a notepad and then going out and saying, this is what we're going to do. Right?
Yeah. The old clipboard chefs. And I think,
chefs.
In the early days, you did it because you wanted to create a good team, and you wanted to, if you're going to spend 12, 14 hours a day with these people, you want it to be fun. It's hard work. But also these days, one, you have to do it because there's such a shortage of employees. You can't afford to lose anybody.
Yeah.
And two, you have to be careful because, not that this is the only reason you do it, but you're going to get sued.
Yeah. It's a different world.
It's a really a different thing.
I actually had one other podcast set up for this morning, and the chef had to cancel or reschedule because he's short-staffed and he's working lunch on his line today, which is a reality, right?
Yeah.
It is a thing. So I totally get it. So while you've obviously, been wildly successful in building teams and engineering these kind of really supportive and unique environments, and I think you genuinely love watching your team thrive, right? Like as a good leader would.
Yeah.
You've also simultaneously been able to stand out as a singular talent, and you're this kind of revered institution in hospitality in your own right and within the landscape of American cuisine. How did you parallel process those things? Or was it even intentional, or was it organic? Or because you built obviously an incredible reputation and name for yourself within the industry on top of what it has meant to lead all these teams in these amazing restaurants.
Well, I think two things. One, I decided early on I didn't want to own my own restaurant because I didn't want to own a bakery. I like being part of restaurants, and I didn't want to own my own because I didn't want to have all that responsibility, on myself. But at the same time that I said that, I'm very competitive with myself, and not just competitive, because that sounds negative. I'm very kind of driven by myself, so by my own thing, and I'm not competitive with other people. My attitude is if someone gets a success, or then I'm just thrilled for them. But at the same time, I really like to keep pushing myself, and I was very fortunate, and I think probably one of the reasons I stayed with the Stars Group and the Fairlawn Group, working with Mark Franz and Jeremiah Tower, is they basically let me do whatever I wanted to do. That being said, I knew them and I knew where I could take that and where I had to kind of check back in with them.
Was that kind of an unwritten thing? It was just kind of like Emily's got free reign. Yeah.
And I think it was
and
because
that comes out of respect, right?
Yeah, because they respected me and I respected them. And I never did anything that outlandish. I mean, at the same time, I remember when I wanted to write a cookbook. I mean, I took Jeremiah out for lunch and said, "Can I write a cookbook? Is it okay? Because it's his restaurant. Can I write Stars Desserts?" And he said, "Sure, fine." And then I said, "Well, let me pay for lunch." He's like, "Nobody's bought me lunch before." And I'm like, "It's those little things." He probably said yes because I brought him lunch, But it's that respect, I think, and I always would check in on him. It's not like I was a runaway train or I ever did anything that was outside the values of the restaurant or the vision of the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I think they got to the point where they actually liked that I was out there doing stuff because I was bringing people into the restaurant. People were coming, and they were obviously doing the same thing, but it was just everybody was winning from it.
Yep. Well, I love that. Let's dig in a little bit to cookbooks because obviously, as a part of a means of expressing your expertise and passion, cookbooks have played a huge role in your life. You're a celebrated writer, and you've won great praise for cookbooks and awards. Writing for you is obviously an extremely important part of your career, and I'm just wondering how that came about and why it's important to you and how you kind of fit it into your career. Because I look at the Emily Lucchetti catalog and I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, how did she do all that? Because like I have written a cookbook, which is here behind me. And I know how much of my soul that took.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it
and,
does.
And the lift that it took while opening a restaurant. I was doing it at the same time as opening my last restaurant.
Well, that's nuts, Matthew. That's really nuts.
And I remember a call, actually. I was in New York coming back from the Today Show, and my editor, an email. My editor emailed me, and she was basically like, listen, if you don't have this thing done by next week, like this thing is off.
Yeah. Yeah.
and she's the sweetest woman ever. So, it wasn't written that way, but that was the intent.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God. Meanwhile, trying to like launch new menus and all the things. So
well, first of all, I didn't own a restaurant. And so I could just like kind of schedule myself off the schedule. But I think one of the reasons that I really wanted to do books is, first of all, I've always loved books. I've always loved cookbooks. I remember Christmas before I even got into the food business. My parents gave me La Méthode and La Technique by Jacques Pepin. I still have them. And it was just like, those are just this classics. And so I kind of just wanted to be in the Library of Congress. I just wanted to have, do the work of writing a book. Not that any of us realize how much work that's going to be. But also, I think I loved people coming into the restaurant and me being able to give them my desserts, and I was controlling all of it. But I also, none of the desserts I do are particularly difficult. They don't have a lot of bells and whistles. So I really wanted to give people the opportunity to make great desserts at home for their family and friends and control the environment that, they were in. So, and do them at home. So I think that was really one of the, impetuses to kind of start writing them. And when I did them, like the first one I did while I was at Stars, and the second one I did in a lapse between Stars and Fairlawn. So I kind of, and then there was the point where in my career where I was managing both Fairlawn and Water Bar, and I had then become an executive pastry chef. So I was responsible and I was doing production, but I wasn't written into the schedule every day. So I think obviously with that kind of thing, you can say, okay, Monday I'm at Water Bar, Tuesday I'm at Fairlawn, Wednesday I'm going to be working on my book. So you can't be, if you're locked into being at one place 100% of the time, it just doesn't work. But if you can't be at A all the time, you can't be at B all the time, it's easier to create C, if that makes any sense.
And I would imagine that having that kind of those tranches of work of having to create books throughout your career while you also have a full-time career as something besides a writer, you have to really come up with some pretty good systems around how you do that, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
I can't imagine that you're just kind of like, you get home from your shift and you scribble some things down. Like you're probably going to it with a very structured.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the reasons I actually switched from savory to pastry was that I am an extremely organized person, and, a due date is a due date. And so, and
Scorpio or Virgo?
Actually, Cancer.
Oh, okay. Okay. That works too. That works too.
Yeah. So, and what I love too about writing books is you work intensely on something and then it's done. I mean, obviously, after you see the book, you have to do the promotion and stuff, but it's not like when you open a restaurant, you work and work and work, and then you have your opening day, and then you go to bed that night and you wake up, you go, oh shit, this is just the beginning. This is day 2. This is when it really gets important. I have no slack from anybody now. It's day 2.
Right. And did you have teams that would help you with the cookbook writing or the R&D or the testing, or was it just all you?
What I did, I was really fortunate to be in the restaurants because I would just kind of put stuff on the menu, or when stuff sold well, I'd just make a note and say, okay, this is going to go into a book. But when it came to recipe testing, one, I did everything till the recipe, quote unquote, got solid by myself because I just didn't want to hand it off to anyone else. But then what I did was I sent them all to home cooks, people that would
that's
be
brilliant.
buying the book instead of hired people. And not to say that hired people aren't, wouldn't work, but this was kind of just a cadre of people that I knew that thought it was really fun, and they would make this stuff, because I think that those are the end people that are buying the book. And so they will be the ones that would be more apt to make a mistake or not read something or say this needs to be more clear or whatever.
Well, it's also what makes them timeless, right? Because when you have the end user involved in the process of determining, its level of execution, then you end up with a book that kind of outlives you in a way. It's just
Hopefully.
out there and people keep using. I mean, the best cookbooks are the ones that get like spilled on and pages burned by the stove, all those things. Right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's funny when, considering that I spent so long on this, I was on the savory side for like 7 or 8 years before I switched to desserts. And one of the reasons I switched is I hated working the line. I absolutely hated it. But one of the things that meant the most to me was after Stars Desserts came out, is a number of savory cooks that came up to me and said, I like this pastry book. That actually meant more to me almost than the pastry cooks coming up and saying they liked it.
Well, your recipes are very simple, right? That's kind of
they're very minimalist.
That's your style.
Yeah, and it's all it's all flavor. It's 100% flavor.
Right. So it's very, in a way, it's extremely technique driven as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we kind of have this whole world of the organizational work that you've done. I would almost in a way call it a different type of mentorship, right? Almost more of a stewardship. You've chaired so many important committees, boards, various organizational bodies, whether it's been your work with JBF or WCR. This part of your career is glaringly potent, that this is something that's really important to you. And I know you, or I think I know you well enough to say that, these aren't just things that you add to your plate because you think it's the right thing to do, or because, you'll get some sort of personal gain out of it, but because you truly enjoy it and you see a great value in it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think right now we live in this crazy world of what feels like fierce individualism, right? We have, personal brands and personal platforms, but you've really found a value in giving back.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, nothing gives me such a great high than to bring really bright people together, or just people that have common beliefs and see them hit it off. Like, I've introduced chefs at boot camp. I said, you have to know, you have to know. And then years later, I see they become best friends, or they cooking together all the time.
You are a great connector.
Yeah. And to me, that is just one of the most exciting things that I could possibly do. And so to me, when I kind of run an organization, I'm a big consensus person. Some of it, I think, is because I like to deflect the attention away from myself, and I don't want to be like the lone wolf saying, do this or do that. But bringing, like with the Beard organization or WCR, there were some very, very talented people around that table that were on the boards. And it's like, how do you bring all those individual people together that are really bright on their own, they're all there for the same values, and to create something even bigger and better that more people can benefit from? And I remember
How do you do that?
Well, I think you bring the people together. You steer a meeting, but you let people be who they are. And you let them bring them to the table, and you basically get out of the way. You have to channel it somewhere, like if people run on too long or they get tangents and things like that. But I think, I definitely, when I was on those boards, I wasn't the sharpest person in the room, but I had the passion, and I had the organization, and I had the ability to not just, it's the ability to, I think, to look at the big picture and look at the little picture. It's like, if someone says, I want to save the world. Well, you can get 10 people around a table and be there from here to eternity. But it's like, okay, what are the little steps? What are the steps, little and big, that we're going to have to take to save the world? And you have to break everything down into much, much, much smaller steps and steps that are tangible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. You said getting out of the way. I think that's so true. And it's something that really great leaders sometimes just don't even think about because they think they need to own the moment, right? Or navigate the challenges kind of on their own and then give direction. And that's not what it's really about at all. It's about kind of letting everybody come to the table with ideas and, determining what the shared philosophy is, right? And then kind of edging it along.
And the other thing I'm a big proponent of, when you get 20 bright people, 10 bright people around a room, if you're talking about a topic, people want to be heard, rightly so. And so before any board meetings, I would call each board member up individually and say, what are you thinking about this issue? What do you think? So people, get to be heard. You see where the commonality is and you see where the differences are. So then when you actually go to the meeting, people they've already stated some of their opinions, so they don't have to go on and on and on about it. But you also can say, okay, we all agree on this. This is great. This is where we differ. So you get to kind of hone in on where the differences are to try to come to consensus. But I think that one-on-one is really important because when you are in groups and on boards, there's some people that are going to talk all the time. There's some people that are going to not talk at all, and there's sometimes
have opinions.
Yeah, and they could be the most valuable people in the room, but they just don't want to take the space. So it's all about allowing people to be heard and getting their viewpoints, because then they also feel part of the process and they want to contribute more. Which for an organization like Beard or Women Chefs and Restaurateurs is crucial.
Absolutely. So from the culinary arts to your authorship of all these incredible books to your organizational work, is there any kind of playbook that you think you could help write for somebody else who wants to try and track a career the same way that Emily Lucchetti has? I mean, is it possible to distill it down to kind of some bullet points for people to keep as their North Star?
Well, I think one is keep it interesting for yourself and keep learning and growing. And, it's interesting. I worked with one restaurant group for the majority of my career. I switched for the, to Big Night restaurant group. But for 20 years, I worked with one restaurant group. And a lot of people feel the importance to hop from one to the other. And I'm not saying that isn't a crucial thing to do. But for me, my job was changing so much, and I saw where there were needs. I matched where the need met my wants, and I would go to Jeremiah or Mark and say, can we do this? So I didn't have to change my job every 2 years or anything like that, because I was changing where I stood. And there's a real strength in that, because you can just focus on that. Now, granted, if you're not learning and growing and changing, you should, go somewhere else. But I think people underestimate. They think if they're working for the same place that they're not growing and changing, which I don't think is true either. And I think you have to be really honest with yourself to say, okay, how much of this is BS that I'm going to get wherever I work, because there's some of that wherever you are, and how much of it is unique to this organization, and it's time for me to leave. Because, in any organization, when you get in, there's going to be good and bad. And, the good often outweighs the bad. And then you get to the point where you've kind of learned as much as you can learn. Then you say to yourself, okay, it's time for me to go somewhere else. But then you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, have I really learned everything that I can learn? And I think people are in a rush to keep moving. It's like motion is progress, and it's like my husband always says to me, has become my mantra. It's like, don't run from something, run to something, and be conscious.
It was always one of the conversations I would have with cooks, or even front of the house folks when they worked for me. And I always encouraged an environment of transparency. If there's something you're unhappy with, or you think you want to go somewhere else, just come talk to me first. Just, ultimately, whatever you want to do is fine, but let's just have the chance to connect. And I would say in those meetings, like, have you treated this like a sponge? Like, in other words, have you really wrung it out? Do you think that you've gotten everything that you can out of this experience for yourself? And if you have, then great. Then maybe there's nothing else here for you, right? But if you feel like there's a little bit of water left in that sponge, like, let's squeeze it. Like, let's figure it out, because I'm down to do that work. I think that's the fun and exciting work, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that, you realize, and again, I realize that everyone benefits from that kind of approach. But we've all worked for people that the minute you say you're giving notice, you're on the blacklist.
Right.
Where no one stays anywhere forever. Everybody leaves eventually. So also you want to have a good relationship with the people that leave. You never know what's going to happen down the road. You may be working for them. I mean, there's just so many different scenarios that could happen. So I think it's just really being, just open-minded and.
So what are you working on right now that is lighting you up? Because I know you, and I know that you don't stop. And so what is it right now that is?
Well, it's interesting to say. So for the last 5 years, I'd say, I've been working on, I guess you'd say, a culinary memoir. And it basically was, I woke up one day and didn't want to be a restaurant pastry chef anymore. What the heck was I going to do with my life? Because it had happened? Yeah. Because, it's not that I want to get out of food or anything like that. But as far as being a restaurant pastry chef and the consulting, all that, I woke up, it's like, I can't do this anymore. I just need to do something else within the food world. So it was like, I was in such a state of turmoil because it was like my whole adult life is this, my whole personality, my whole being is tied up into being a restaurant pastry chef. What the heck am I going to do? So it was like this 5-year journey to kind of come out of that and not feel so desolate about it. And it's kind of a combination of what I call pastry brain and poetry brain. Because when you have pastry brain, you're looking at a list, you're working on that list, and you're always adding things to that list. And I did it for 20 years. And then I looked around, it's like, what did I miss? Not what did I miss by picking a different career, but what did I miss by not smelling the peaches? More like, we don't have enough peaches, not like, how do the peaches smell? So I actually wrote about this whole transition. And as I said, it took me 5 years. And not only did I I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to articulate what I wanted to say, because before,
it's a different type of book.
Right? And it was before, it's like, what are you feeling? You hold up your Zabayon and you say, this is it. This is me. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So anyway, I've just finished that, and I have a book agent, and we're putting it out to publishers and stuff. But I even say it's a weird, quirky book. So we'll see. I may end up self-publishing it, but we'll see. And what's interesting to your point too about mentorship and leadership, I'm now at the point where I'm trying to say, what is my next thing? Because I have a thing in me. I don't necessarily know what it is. And I've been in the business for so long and one of the reasons I stepped off the board too is I want to figure that out. And I don't know what that answer is yet, but hopefully I'll figure it out soon.
Hopefully more smelling of the peaches. That's what I say.
Yeah.
And you're also still got your hands in the food a little bit from time to time as well.
100%.
Right?
100%. I mean, I do, I make jams throughout the year, and I sell them in a pop-up, most of them at Omnivore Books in San Francisco. I do a big Christmas pop-up, and I started making bean to bar chocolate, which was super fun because I remember the first time I started making, it was like, okay, I have my little notebook, and this is what I'm going to write down my recipe for chocolate bar making. But chocolate is like, it's its own thing. You can't do it like a shortcake where each time you make the shortcake, it's going to be the same. Chocolate has a life of its own. You have to give up a lot of control when you make chocolate. And that was really hard to do. That's one of the things I also write about in the book is like, oh my God, I got to let myself go. I can't control everything.
I was going to say making chocolate was tough to be able to let go of that process, or letting go of control.
letting go of control. Just to let anybody can make good chocolate or okay chocolate, but how do you make the really amazing stuff? You just have to go with the flow of it. You can't 350 for 17 minutes. It doesn't work.
Right. A little bit more science than anything, right?
Yeah.
Who is the one person that you hired that transformed your business? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your business, but it could be a business that you worked in as well.
Oh, that I hired.
Yeah. One transformational hire that you've made in your career.
Actually, can it be the person I didn't hire?
Yeah, I love that answer.
There was a woman named Janet Ricola who applied for a pastry position with me at Stars. And I said to her at the time, "You're overqualified. I'll know you quit. You'll quit in 2 months," which today you couldn't say that. And she went on to become, right after that, the pastry chef at Postrio for Wolfgang Puck, and has become one of my dearest friends in the entire world.
That's fantastic.
And I've continued. I always call her up for recipes. For the last 20 years and we call each other up for, recommendations for employees, like this person used to work for you. Should I hire him? All that kind of stuff.
So what could have been an employment relationship that could have lasted who knows how long has turned into a lifelong friendship because you didn't hire them.
Exactly.
Love it.
And it's a personal friendship and a culinary friendship as well. A colleague culinary.
Best kinds of
exactly.
Right? That's great. Okay. The second one is, what has been the most successful marketing decision that you've made for either yourself or your business?
To be myself. I think that when architectural desserts came out in the early 1990s, everything was very tall and very frilly and lots of garnishes. I said
things leaning on each other, right? Like all of that.
Wheel shapes,
That's right.
And I said to myself, this is the style. I have to do it. But I just internally, as much as I tried to do it because it was the current trend, I fought it and I fought it and I fought it inside. And the stuff was never the stuff. The desserts weren't good. Nothing spoke to my soul. And finally, I said to myself, they're not speaking to your soul because it's not who you are. So give it up. And I gave it up and I felt very freed. But it was hard when everybody else is doing something and all the press is writing about it. And you're like, just sitting in my corner, doing my little thing. And it's just
freedom of individualism.
Yeah, but it was really hard at first, but I finally did it. And I never went back.
I love it. Okay. The last one I have is, what is the one tool that you use every day? And it could be anything. It could be a kitchen tool. It could be software. It could be your phone. It could be whatever.
A spoon.
Yeah.
A spoon to eat with. I mean, because we have a lot of one bowl meals at our house. And so it's usually a spoon, and you can plate any dessert with a spoon.
I too. I have the craziest spoon collection. It drives Kate insane.
Yeah. And which they all are,
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's like when people plate desserts and I said, that looks like it came out of a squeeze bottle. I don't mind if you use a squeeze bottle, but don't make it look like it came out of a squeeze bottle.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.